Welcome to the Appetite for Discussion show with your host, Brendan Crouch.
Ooh, and just like that, here we are.
Hey.
Scott Plemmons.
Yes.
How you doing, man?
Hey, Brandon, great. Glad to be here, man.
It's glad to have you here. So, you, sir, are the owner, creator, founder of Hootenany Brewery?
I am.
Man.
The one and only.
Is there only one?
There is only one. I'm the only employee of Hootenany Brewing.
You're a busy guy.
And there's only one location with Hootenany Brewing. Yeah.
And where is your location?
The brewery is actually located in Mooresville, only about Shenville Road. So I don't know how familiar you are. Come off of Highway 21,
Yep.
and off of Shenville Road. And it's a bit of a unique situation in that I probably am the only commercial brewery that's on a horse farm.
What?
On a horse farm.
How did you manage that?
It wasn't easy, let me tell you.
So was it planned?
I can give you the story of how we ended up
Fire
there.
away.
Yeah. So I don't know, this goes way back to, I guess, when I decided to start brewing beer in the first place. And my wife, we were actually dating at the time. She thought it would be something neat for us to do together because I was really starting to get into craft beer, that we could get a homebrew kit and brew beer together.
And about how long ago was this?
This was back in 2000 and, 2012.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
about 2012.
Oh, wow. So you've come a long way in 7 years.
Yeah, it's been a really fun ride. Actually, the kind of the irony of it all, I guess, was she bought the kit for me, and we were going to brew beer together, and that's the only time we've ever brewed beer together. It was the first time we brewed beer together. So I was you're really getting into craft beer, and you couldn't at the time. This is going back, into the early the 2000 2005. The resurgence of, or the great tremendous growth of craft beer that we are experiencing today. We really didn't have that growth back then. So a funny story. We were actually still dating at the time, and she. This goes back to before she bought the kit for me. She knew I was into beer, and she was trying to impress me, so to speak. And there was this beer that I fell in love with. It's called Fat Tire, which the kit that she bought me was named Flat Tire, because you can't. They couldn't knock off the beer Fat Tire, which is a New Belgium beer, and at the time you can only buy it on the West Coast.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that.
So her ex-husband happened to live on the West Coast, and they stayed close enough so that she could say, "Hey, you mind packaging up some of this Fat Tire and shipping it out east?" So he does, and we receive it, and obviously I was impressed. And at the time, you could only buy that beer in the large bottles, like a 22 ounce. They call them a bomber bottle.
That's what they're called, bomber
bottles, and it sounds a little sacrilegious, but in my Easter basket that she prepared for me that year were 2 bottles of Fat Tire beer. So much for the eggs, right?
That's right.
Easter eggs. No, that was a cool gift, and then she realized how much I was into craft beer, and fast forward to a little bit later in our relationship, and she purchased the kit, and we made this batch of beer together, and it turned out terrible. It was the worst beer you would have ever had in your life.
And I appreciate your honesty, because most people go, we tried it, it was good, it was okay. You're like, no, it was terrible.
It was terrible.
Thanks, honey.
It didn't end our relationship, but it was the end of our brewing beer together, put it that way. So we did bottle up 2 cases of this beer.
Okay.
And we were living in our first home together at the time. And after we popped a couple of the bottles and realized it was a really bad beer, I just stuck the rest of it under the stairwell and kind of had forgotten about it. So I had almost 2 cases of bottled beer. Fast forward, we got married, and we decided to move into another home. So fast forward, this was another year and a half or so, and we got the beer out as we were packing things up. And it actually tasted a little better a year and a half later than it did the day we made it. But it still was really bad beer, really bad beer. So we packed up the house and packed up all of my homebrew equipment and moved into our new home. And we were visiting some friends up in the mountains. This was fast forward another about a year and a half or so. And the guy who owned the house was a craft beer connoisseur himself and had pulled out some of the beer that he had made, and it was actually really good. And Sandy, my wife, said, you should give it another shot.
Good job, Sandy.
Yeah, good job, Sandy. So I did. I decided to dig out of, again, we had moved.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of stuff to dig through. Only was able to put together about half of the kit.
Okay.
So went back to put a little plug in for alternative beverage, which is where I purchased my beer supplies. Went back over to AB, and they helped me piece together the kit so that I could make my second batch of beer. Granted, go ahead.
Were you going to go with a different, I don't know what path you went down on the first? Did you go for a certain palette? Did you try to make the flat tire, I guess?
I tried to make the flat tire, which it was a kit.
Right.
And you would think it's pretty hard to screw up a kit.
So are you going to go flat tire on the second one too?
No, we did not. We did not go flat tire.
No,
on the
we
second.
did not.
So we picked this another amber style beer. I did. Again, she was done with it. And brewed this batch of beer after the encouragement of this gentleman who we were visiting up in the mountains, and lo and behold, the second batch of beer turned out really good. Shared it with some friends, and everybody seemed to think that maybe I had a knack for it. Again,
Hey,
this is kit beer.
Right.
It's kind of like easy bake oven. It's hard to mess it up. Put A and B and mix it with C, and but we were able to mess up the first batch that we did make. But the second one was good.
Yeah.
And in the craft beer space, there's different levels of brewing. The first level is the kit, and that's how most people start out. And it literally is just ingredients and water and boiling and yeast and a few things you put together to hopefully make good beer. And then the next stage is called all grain brewing, which is where you literally buy all of your malts and specialty malts, your base malt. And you mill it, either you buy it pre-milled or you mill it yourself, and you're really kind of starting with like a recipe from scratch.
Okay.
And so I brewed several homebrew kits, and had advanced to all grain brewing.
Okay.
All grain brewing, first batch I made, I was so excited that as soon as I tasted it, I poured it into a solo cup, right? And I put it in my car. Shouldn't have done that, right? And I ran it over to the beer store, and I said, "Larry, you got to try this." Larry, he's Larry. So it actually turned out really, really good, and he encouraged me, and the others encouraged me to continue to make all grain beer.
Okay.
So I'm in the kitchen still. So you're starting with kits in the kitchen,
right?
And the all grain was also a similar process where I did a lot of the hot side of the brewing on the kitchen stove top.
Okay.
And there's this horrible, horrible thing in brewing called a boil over.
Ooh.
And a boil over is when you turn your back for a second and you got your temperature too high and the beer boils over, and think of it as just crystallized sugar sticking to anything that it touches, and you cannot get this shit up. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay. So you can't get it up. And so
this is in the home that you've recently moved into, and you're in your kitchen, and you got a boil over.
I've got a boil over.
That's not good.
Not good. So the next plan after a boil over was to figure out where else I could brew my beer.
Bingo.
Okay. This is the long journey to me becoming a commercial brewer. But I'm taking you on this journey.
No,
with
man,
me.
I love a good ride.
Okay, it's a good ride. We're doing this remodel at the house. Timing was good, so I was able to grab. We're on a 12-acre horse farm.
Right.
So we're doing an extension to the property, and grab the plan in time to sort of carve out a little space about as big as your studio.
Okay.
That is today Hootenany Brewing. So within a building on our property, a detached building on our property, is my brewery, and that was all as a result of the boil over in the kitchen and wanting to follow my passion, because I really loved, at that time I was really into it.
Yeah.
And I knew I needed more space, and so it was a combination of the bowl over and, okay, I got to do something else, because I'm really enjoying what I'm doing.
Right.
It's a lot of fun, and I'm getting some positive feedback from people I've shared the beer with along the way, and so it was a good timing to be building this building. It was, again, within the building, about the size of your studio. So what is this, about a 15 by 20 or something like that? 20 by 20, maybe? 18 by, yeah. So it was, I could say it would be about this size.
About this size.
A little more rectangular, but this is more square. But it was you can barely turn around in it. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
With all the equipment in
Sure.
it, you can barely turn around in it. The process that I kind of went through was building my own brewery, and there's a guy that has created this catalog and parts kit for how to build your own brewery.
Wow.
Well, it was easy. It would have been a hell of a lot easier to have purchased all this stuff, pre-assembled, and
Right.
But I went the path of trying to build out this brewery myself. Literally taking a large kettle and drilling a hole through stainless steel and putting fittings in it. It was kind of funny when I built the first order on Amazon. There were 800 pieces that I ordered. Some of them were multiples of the same one, but there were 800 different pieces that it took to put this thing together. So it was unbelievable, the number of parts and pieces.
Are you good at putting stuff together?
I am now. I was not so good, and the guy did a really good job. Electric Brewing is the guy. That's his website, the Electric Brewing Company. He did a good job of putting this together, and I was able to follow the instructions. And so over the course of, this was probably a couple of months, I built out what is now Hootenany Brewing. I was I was still working and still am working, doing consulting has been my job. I was at Lowe's corporate over in worked up here in Wilkesboro for a number of years, and of the corporate office in Mooresville for a number of years. And after I left about 10 years ago, I was doing consulting. So I'm still kind of a weekend brewer.
I got you.
Working through the week, doing the brews on the weekends, and finally got the brewery put together and brewed my first batch on it. Turned out pretty good. You got there's a lot of differences in scaling of the equipment. So you're brewing in a kitchen on small equipment, and then suddenly you're scaling it to a larger recipe, a larger batch. So there's some trial and error.
I was gonna say, it's probably a lot of tinkering that goes along with it. You trying to figure it out. It's not as cut and dry as A, B, C, and D. Right? You have to.
There's the art and the science of it, is what I like to say. The art of it is just kind of finagling recipes to get them to where you like for them to be, and there's some technology that brewers use, apps that programs where you can have a pretty good idea of what your recipe is going to turn out like, just based on the inputs that you put into the system. And there's a couple of those out there. So I've at this point I've got my what's considered to be I don't want to get too technical, but it's a half barrel brew house. Okay. When you think about a keg that you would, a large one, call it a party keg. Yeah. Is a half barrel, so they're roughly 15 gallons of beer. Okay. Is what I've been producing per batch. So it's a long brew day. A brew day is still the same if you're brewing, a gallon, or if you're brewing 100 gallons. Good grief. They're still the same. There's some, obviously, large breweries have a lot, some technology that helps them kind of speed the process up. But for most of us, it's about a 6 to 7 hour day. Oh, wow. Regardless of the size.
So you're putting in a shift at work.
Putting in a shift at work on the weekends, at the time. So it fast forward a little bit further, and I'm brewing 2-3 batches a week, and I'm still an amateur brewer, a home brewer at that time. And there was this shift where my wife was also at Lowe's,
Yeah.
Sandy, and she had left Lowe's and she was working for a nonprofit in Mooresville, and she spent about 4 years, working at this nonprofit, and decided to open a yoga studio because she had a passion for yoga.
Yeah.
Her and her business partner opened Let It Flow Yoga, which is in Troutman.
Okay.
Yoga. They bought an old antique store. It's a house there,
Right by Troutman Funeral Home.
Exactly next
Absolutely.
door to the So her and her partner owned Let It Flow Yoga.
Yep.
And they were going to, their business model was going to be to have yoga, of course, have a community room, and have within the community room have like a bar set up.
Okay.
They wanted to sell beer, kombucha, prosecco, wine, tea, coffee.
Sounds pretty good so far.
It's good. It's a good setup, and put a little plug in for them. They have a lot of their yoga clients that love to come in and take a class and come downstairs and grab a beer, grab a mimosa,
sure,
cup of coffee.
A little reward for that hard work.
Absolutely. Well, when she decided to sell beer, she kind of nudged me and said, you've been brewing for a while. Why don't you think about getting your commercial license?
Oh, so you have to have a license to do that.
Well, there's a certain amount of beer that a home brewer can make.
Okay.
In a given year to still be considered a home brewer and
a hobby. Right.
Hobby brewer.
Because at this point, you got a hell of a hobby.
Yeah, it's a hell of a hobby. It is. And I've been making a lot of friends.
I guarantee you.
Friends along the way too, because you got to when you're brewing 17 or 15 gallons finished beer. I'm not going to drink all that myself. So you bottle it, you put it in growlers. You give it to friends. You have people over. So I was having a lot of fun at that stage when I was still an amateur, home brewer. But ramping it up to becoming a commercial brewer, there was a lot of red tape. Anybody that's listening to this that's considered doing it or has done it, you can understand, appreciate where I'm coming from. It took almost a year from when I said, okay, I'm going to get my commercial license to when I actually got my commercial license.
Why so long?
There's a couple of steps in there. There's working with the federal government, and that's the biggest holdup. And
they're pretty speedy at what they do, though, right?
Yeah.
The government's always fast.
I tell you, there's so many breweries opening up. There's over 6,000, almost 7,000 craft breweries in the U.S. right now, and that's really doubled in just the last 3 years.
Wow!
So the TTB, the governing agency that has to review every application, and it's not just like filling out an employment application and turning it over to somebody, and somebody reviews it and says you can have the job.
Right.
Getting your brewers, they call it a brewer's notice, but getting your license to brew beer consists of background checks for anybody associated with the brewery, fingerprinting at the sheriff's office. It's long applications. We even have a commercial lease, which is what's required. So Scott and Sandy Plemmons have a building on their property that is leased to Hootenany Brewing Company.
Right.
And that's where the brewery is. So there's a lot of red tape that you have to go through, and the biggest thing is just waiting.
Right.
There's this long waiting process as you kind of go into the queue, and it's a similar process for having labels approved for your beer, which I can talk about that in a minute. But I'll come back around to the story. The story with Sandy in the yoga studio. So about a year later, I'm a licensed brewer, and the studio became the first customer, and I've got a couple 3 beers in there. She has a 4-tap system, and it's working really well. The studio's doing really well. People are coming in, taking a class, coming down, having a beer or another drink, and I realized at that point, after I'd spent the money I'd spent and the time I had spent, that I needed more than one customer.
Right.
So I started knocking on some doors, and there's some really the industry is very friendly. North Carolina is a very friendly state for craft beer, and the industry itself is very friendly in that people in the industry really help each other out. So you can ask other brewers questions.
Yep.
I've tapped into the knowledge bank of the Ghostface Mike Cuddy and the Ghostface Brewing people, on many, many occasions, and then knocking on doors of different tap rooms.
Yeah.
It gave me the opportunity to come in and took the chance on putting my beer on tap. And so that's how I got from selling one customer, which was a yoga studio,
right?
The most least likely of places, right? You would think about
just gotta have that first
beer.
one.
That's right. And then branched out and picked up a few more places, around the county.
We had Fourth Creek Brewing on last year and Red Buffalo Brewing Company, and it was interesting. They opened up just a few blocks down the road from one another, a few months with one another, but it's not it's more of a friendly neighbor brotherhood. I didn't realize what a tight knit community the brewing community really is, and instead of you see a lot of people who are. I mean, they're still competitors, of course, but it's not. There's no ill will. There are always, people like going back and forth to the breweries here in Statesville, the two that we have, and it's just almost like it's a camaraderie. Everybody wants everybody to do well.
It's the only industry. You're right. It's the only industry I know of where you can walk into a brewery and there's a trail map of all the other breweries in the area.
Right.
Think about that. Right. Do you go to a restaurant and do they advertise for their competition?
No, never.
Or a car dealership, are they advertising? No, you just don't see that. It's really a neat, I guess, factor, that I guess kind of helped me make the decision to move into it. If I had not had the the camaraderie with some of the other brewers in the area, the D9 folks, very friendly. I know the Red Buffalo. I know the Fourth Creek guys. Met them, done some events with them, and I know they'll open the door anytime there's a question. But it's a very interesting industry, very collaborative.
I think too when you're walking into a brewery, there's almost it's a different feeling, it's a different environment and vibe as walking into a bar. I mean, they're a bar, yes, but walking into it's almost more like a warm, inviting feeling, like you feel just the warm atmosphere, an acceptance. If you walk into a bar, it's a little bit more. It's just not as like, hey, go have a seat over there at the table. Somebody be with you in a minute, or belly up to the bar or whatever. But it's just a different experience, and I think most people. How about this? For me, in my own experience, going into mini bars in my little time here on Earth, and going into breweries, it seems like the brewery is more family friendly, customer friendly as an overall experience.
I agree with that, and I think it's you mentioned family friendly. You'll see most breweries are very kid friendly, and many are pet friendly. There was an issue in North Carolina where if you served food in your establishment, you couldn't have pets,
right?
And they've now passed a law in North Carolina that where you can, and of course that put an end to dogs and cats, believe it or not, going into breweries anywhere, and now they've relaxed that law, and you can now have pets back in the breweries again. Obviously, kids, but it is more of a family friendly.
I would agree.
You'll see,
I think so.
You'll see the game corner where you can go over and grab a board game, and you'll see the kids sitting in the corner playing a board game, or the adults sitting in the corner playing a board game. But you don't see that in a bar.
You don't.
It's very different. And typically, most of your breweries, they'll have a TV or two, but they're not sports bars.
Right.
And they're not trying to be sports bars. They're trying to be that, it's the culture of the beer industry and the family-friendly, nature of the place, and the camaraderie and very relaxing environment.
Well, you actually brought us a couple here to sample.
Sure,
Let's crack some of those things open.
You got it, man.
We'll keep chatting.
All right.
You're as you're opening up there. We were in Asheville this past weekend celebrating my sister-in-law's surprise 34th birthday party, and I was shocked at the amount of dogs. I was like, if that's a law in Asheville, they are ignoring that law because the animals were in. They're participating. They're
participating. Some people don't appreciate that. I don't know how much you want here. I'll pull you.
Yeah, man. I'm not going to tell you to stop.
This is
Thank you, sir.
This is what I call yin yang.
Yin yang.
Yin yang.
Okay.
This was brewed for my wife. We were at a brewery actually in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina.
Yeah.
It was called Low Tide Brewing.
Cheers.
Want to give it a try? It's called Low Tide Brewing, and they had a beer that was made with it was a brown ale made with coconut and chai spice. Well, I'm still kind of in that transitional stage between home brewer and commercial brewer. So we got home, and she's like, "That beer was so good." We actually bought a crowler of it.
Yeah.
So a crowler is a large can, 32-ounce can that can be sealed. So that
this is delicious, by the way. This is good.
Much.
Well done, sir.
Thank you. She said, "I want you to figure out how to make a coconut chai beer." All right. So I called the brewery. And talk about they're collaborative. But people aren't going to give recipes away.
They're not going to.
I did find
they're not going to
out.
give you the secret sauce.
Yeah, the
right?
secret sauce. They gave me some hints.
Yeah.
So I came home, and it took me 3 sessions to dial in what you're drinking right now, which is the Yin Yang Coconut Chai Porter. Jeremy sold this a lot of this over at Cedar Stump.
Okay, so they carry some of your product. Cedar
Stump, Sky Mountain Coffee. I think you had Andy from Sky Mountain. He's got that hybrid wine and coffee and beer model, and actually I have this beer on tap now, which is called I'll Have a Nutter, which is my
that's your milk stout.
The milk stout.
Oh, I do like the milk stout too.
That's a product of hanging out one day, drinking, trying to come up with a name for a milk stout. So
have you patented that name or trademarked it or whatnot?
That name is trademarked.
Good, yeah, because that's genius.
That name is trademarked, and it was, again, after having a few and trying to just beating our heads. Okay, it's a stout, it's a milk stout, milk cow. And then my wife and I, eventually kind of landed on I'll Have a Nutter. So that was the first beer that we trademarked.
Now, that would have happened to me after I had several of those trying to figure it out, and I would have got a little bit tongue-tied. It would have come out another.
It's called a few other things, too, I can tell you that. Yeah, it was like, I guess, my flagship beer. It's the first one that we really went after. It's a lot of breweries they'll start with an IPA or something more on the lighter, but I got really comfortable brewing these 2 dark beers, and that's why I brought these 2. They're the only 2 that I bottle.
Okay.
And bottling for a amateur or a small commercial brewer is about the same. It's 1 bottle at a time. It's using what's called a beer gun. So you're pumping CO2 into a bottle, and then you're filling it with beer 1 bottle at a time. So that's it takes a while. So I don't produce a lot of beer in bottles, and I don't do any in cans. But these are the 2 that I do bottle.
So how did you come up with the name Hootenany Brewery?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked.
I get 1 good question an episode. That was it.
Hootenany is it has many meanings if you go out to Wikipedia, but the one that kind of resonated with us was just a country party.
A country party.
But this, I give credit to my wife again for coming up with the name Hootenany. When I was at Lowe's, I was there from 1980 until 2009.
Oh, wow.
So I spent a lot of time at Lowe's. But before that, I'm a second-generation Lowe's employee. My father was also at Lowe's. He was there from the mid-'50s to the mid-'70s. And what Lowe's calls today an annual sales meeting, Lowe's called in the 50s, 60s, and 70s a Hootenany, which was a party. And they were quite the party. From what I understand, I never really participated in one of them myself. I came along a little bit later in the Lowe's history books, but so that we thought it resonated well.
Absolutely.
Number one, it meant party.
Yep.
And Hootenany, we wanted the name to kind of represent who we were at the point in our lives. We're getting into these call them second interests late in life. She's doing the yoga. I'm doing the brewery into our 50s. And I say Hootenany is fun. And people, anybody that worked at Lowe's back, and there's not too many of them around anymore that remember Hootenannies, but it would resonate. And if it didn't resonate with them, then it was still kind of a fun name.
Yeah.
It was a fun name.
It is a fun name, and it makes sense too. It's interesting that it's fascinating to me that you're a second generation Lowe's guy, and they used to have Hootenannies, and now you have your own company named Hootenany Brewery.
Hootenanny.
That's kind of neat. Actually, it's very neat.
And people laugh at it. They get a kick out of it. Most people say, "What does Hootenanny mean?"
Sure.
And,
It's an older
what's
word.
The origin.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a kind of a folk name.
Well, you're in the right area for that.
Yeah.
You were talking about almost like a second. You guys are, your wife's doing the yoga thing, you're doing the brewery thing, you've done the corporate America kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like it's just a different chapter for you guys. I was traveling today. I drive back and forth to Charlotte for my real job. And I was sitting there thinking today, like, what if, I've done what I'm doing now. What if I could just hit the pause button and not have to take any financial risk, but then I could jump into another field, and we could live 10 years of being a brewmaster. We could try that. Maybe I want to be an actor, or maybe then I want to go try and be a chef, or maybe I want to just do something really off the grid. It's like, were we really put here on planet Earth to do this one thing for 30 or 40 years and try to make ourselves happy doing that? It's like, how do we tap into these other things? As I've gotten older, I'm knocking on the 40, married, have twins at home who should be in the bed, and it's like, what's my story? What am I here to do? Have you really found, obviously, to be a husband and father? That goes without being said, but you want to accomplish stuff. You want to create things. Not just be the guy who's done the whatever for 30 years and they give you the little watch and say, get your ass out the door. Here comes the younger guy to take your place.
Right.
So it's, it's almost like a sense of purpose. But you also want to have some fun and try different things, and because life has so much to offer. We're here on this little planet for such a short period of time. I want to do it all. I don't have time.
Well, it's a great point, and I left Lowe's it was 10 years ago, and the first thing my wife did after I left was hire a career coach, because I had been with Lowe's all of my working life. And a career coach is supposed to help you figure out what the next stage of your life is.
Right.
Well, being a brewer was not on their list of things that you may want to
when you filled out the checklist, right, of the criteria and your personality, brewer wasn't on there anywhere.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
It's weird.
So honestly, I did I guess the safe thing. I followed that, the continuation of corporate America, being a consultant, working with a lot of people that I'd already worked with for 30 years, and trying to, help suppliers, get their way, get their product into Lowe's, and all this time in the back of my mind, I'm saying, that's not what I want to do.
Right.
It's not what I want to do. And I didn't know that it was going to be brewing beer either.
Sure.
But I just knew that's not what I wanted to do. And it was, my wife was in a similar situation. She worked in a nonprofit, and it was a very challenging role because of just the nature of the nonprofit. It was a pediatric cancer foundation that she spent a lot of time with these kids, and lost a lot of them year over year. It's very difficult, very challenging.
100%.
So she put her heart and soul into that for for 4 years, but she realized her passion was yoga, and so she was able to cut loose and follow her dream, which sort of opened the door for me to follow my dream.
It helps.
And I didn't know, again, I owe it all to her, really, because she bought that kit and thought it was a good thing for us to do together. And a few years later, I decided that it was.
Is she a fan of your beer?
She is a fan. And I said, this beer we're drinking, this yin yang, is a kind of a themed after the yoga. It's the yin and the yang. It's coconut, it's chai. It's kind of a relaxing, easygoing style of beer, non-threatening, not hoppy. So that was her name, and we were going to put yin yang in the studio, but it really wasn't a dark beer kind of a crowd. It was more of a lighter. You come out of a yoga class, you want to chug a 16-ounce milk stout, right?
Not so much,
or a porter in this case. Yeah, so we both are on these paths that have crossed a couple of times along the way, but we're doing our own thing independently, and she's a big supporter. We're gonna be working a couple of festivals coming up in the next month, actually 3. and she's right there with me pouring beer. As I said earlier, Hootenanny is a one-person shop.
Yeah.
So I'm the keg washer, I'm the brewer, I'm the delivery guy.
It's really a full-time job.
It is.
I mean, you consult too, but I mean, Hootenanny has to take up a bulk of your time.
Well, and it has, and that transition or migration, I guess, away from consulting now has become pretty much a full-time job brewing.
So you can't come to your farm and to your brewery and purchase things direct. You have to go to the store or go to a brewery and drink your product on tap, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there's different different licenses, and I have a manufacturing, distribution, and special events. So I can do events.
Okay.
I'm doing there's a big Hops Fest coming up at Langtree, heading towards Charlotte here in a couple of weeks. Actually, that one's this Saturday. Hops in Harmony in Statesville.
Yep.
Is coming up October 5th.
Yep.
We'll be pouring beer at
Awesome.
that event. Yeah, so but we decided early on that we did not want people coming to our home
Yes.
and buying beer or having
Right.
a tap room on our property. And that is by far the number one question we get. And we're part of now a couple of brewery trails, which we didn't ask to be part of them, but now we're showing up on these websites.
Well, because you're a Hootenany Brewery, right?
We're a brewery.
So,
Yeah, people don't distinguish between those that have tap rooms and those that don't. They just see brewery.
so would you ever in the future, would it be something that you would want to have, like a standalone store where you have people come in, or are you comfortable and you like what you're doing now?
Everybody in the industry that I've talked to said, well, you're really kind of doing it backwards.
Yeah, true.
Right. You have a brewery, you have a tap room.
Yep.
And eventually you distribute. You get to the point where you create enough volume, because there's better margin in tap room sales, obviously, than in distribution. And with distribution, you have to have somebody to deliver it, which is me, which I love it because I get to interface with the customer. And the day that I ever get big enough to where I couldn't walk into the Kilted Buffalo, who's a customer of mine,
Kilted
or
in Huntersville.
No, the one in Langtree.
Okay.
Yeah, or
nice.
On Tap, or Ultimate Ales, or Cedar Stump, or Sky Mountain. Any of those places that buy my beer and shake a hand and sit down and talk beer with them. So that I love that aspect of it. So every now and then I think about it, or someone says, "Why don't you open a tap room?"
Right.
I think, okay, I walk out into the backyard, I go into the brewery, I start the brew process at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
I go do a few things, I go back, I continue the brew process. I never have to leave home to brew beer. I keg it, I take it out to a cooler, and then I distribute it. So I don't have to deal with employees,
which is kind of nice, or the public.
I don't mind I do a lot of events. I do, in our industry, tap takeovers is a really big opportunity to get your beer out in front of people that have never had it before.
I guess the biggest thing would be employees, and then the overhead of a new brick and mortar, commercial property that you're going to either lease, rent, buy, whatever.
That's true.
So yeah, there might. You know what? You did do it backwards, but you might have did it the right way.
Well, for what I was after, and the stage I am in my life, and having a lot of fun doing it. It's sometimes I'll take on a little more than I should in terms of events. We all do. And my wife will be, you said you weren't going to do this or that, and they ended up taking on one more, event, and then I'm brewing on a Saturday or a Sunday, which I normally, was always doing, and now I'm able to at least brew some through the week now.
So, where all is your product sold?
I have a very tight circle of distribution.
Okay.
And it has a lot to do, quite frankly, with the size of the equipment,
right?
The amount of beer I can produce, and not trying to overextend myself. So,
right.
But I do have beer at one place called I mentioned Kilted Buffalo.
Yeah.
And then I have Sky Mountain Coffee up here in Statesville. I have Let It Flow Yoga. I have Cedar Stump. So those are both, Troutman locations. And then I will be on a rotation at Ultimate L's in Mooresville, On Tap in Mooresville. Lowe's Foods is a big customer of mine.
Get out of here.
The one location in Mooresville, they are very.
Is that a new? Is that a new customer of yours, Lowe's Food?
They've been buying for over a year from me. They have the beer den concept, which is awesome. People go in, buy beer, do their grocery shopping, and come out with probably a lot more than they expected to come out with.
I mean, congratulations to you, because anytime you hear someone coming up with a new product that can be sold in the grocery store, be it food, drink, water, and whatever it is, they talk about how hard it is and shelf space.
Sure.
So the fact that, you're brewing this on your horse farm and that there is a major grocery store chain, Lowe's, and they have your product.
Yeah, it's
good for you.
It's cool. It's
if you're not gonna pat yourself on the back, I'll do it.
Well, thank you.
Good for you, man.
But I respect what they're doing with. I mean, they're very progressive with craft beer. Their beer den. They actually have. I'm not sure which of their locations it's in, but they have a brewery inside a Lowe's Food, and I want to say it's down towards the coast.
Really?
But they're that progressive to where they're really trying to go after this craft beer market.
Absolutely.
A nano, I imagine it's even smaller, than the system I use.
I mean, if you think about it, you talked about this explosion of the craft beer industry. 6,000 right now, and you think of what's going on in North Carolina. I mean, people who are smart and investors or whatnot, I guess this is the time when you strike when the iron's hot type of thing.
Yeah.
And you capitalize on what people want and what's hot and what's important.
And people, it depends on who you talk to. The industry's saturated. It's reached the peak. There's still more craft breweries opening than there are closing.
That's good.
And that's a good thing. The momentum is good. I think the most recent information I saw, the beer industry in the country is flat, and that's domestic and craft imported. But the craft beer industry is still growing, which means the domestic slice of that pie is actually flatter or a little bit down. So the craft beer is still where it's at, and I think it's important. I think people really love, and we talked a little bit about it earlier with this family-friendly environment.
Yeah.
People really love coming in and seeing the equipment.
Yeah, absolutely.
They like to know that beer is as fresh as it comes, because right there's the equipment that it
right
came
there
out
it
of.
is.
And maybe the brewer's even working.
Yeah.
While they're in there purchasing beer.
Can we try the?
You bet. I'll have another.
Yeah, absolutely.
Names are fun.
So, no, two questions. One, how do you know when you've settled on the taste? Like, do you have 7, 9, 11, 3 friends, or is it just your palate? And you're like, yep, this is the one.
That's a good question. I think it's.
Thank you.
Honestly, my palate and my wife's palate are pretty good. Mm-hmm. She'll tell me when I need to throw a batch away. I just pitched a batch of beer the other day because it was not. It could have been passed off as a beer, but she said this beer. You can't sell this beer. It's not good. It's not good to me, and so I dumped it. 17 gallons down the drain.
It's good. It's good that you're not afraid to do that, and also you have a wife and partner and someone who can tell you, for lack of better terms, this is shit.
Yeah.
Because you want that. Because she's not afraid of hurting your feelings.
No.
Right? She's telling you straight. Because my wife would, she would, what we have a cut the shit moment, and she would say, "This is crap."
Yeah.
And every time, from time to time, when we're having a discussion about something important or whatnot, we go, all right, let's have a cut the shit moment.
Yeah.
Right. Should we be doing this? Should we not be doing that? And no.
And we have those moments every day. Should I really be brewing? Should you really be running a yoga studio, or should we be doing something else? But yeah, when it comes to beer and friends, and there's an app out there that everybody uses called Untapped, and you go in. It's for the beer connoisseur. Mostly, but you go into an establishment, you rate a beer based on style profile and taste and hop, whatever does it meet the characteristics that beer that should meet? And so people will rate beers, and you can get a lot of good feedback from the general public. Now, sometimes it's biased. You know, you got a friend, and I think I do have a lot of friends. I'm fortunate that drink my beer.
Yeah.
Probably give me ratings that, you know, are in favor of Hootenanny, that if they were going and drinking a beer that they didn't know and it was the same beer, and, you know, but I like to think that, you know, just through a lot of taste testing and trial and error, that you dial in a recipe, and once you get it dialed in, then the challenge is replicating that recipe. And small batch brewing, which is what I do, it's a lot more challenging to replicate that recipe than if you're a large batch brewer, because they're just, margin of error is so small.
It's interesting, but, you know, I was going to tell you, by the way, this I'll Have Nutter is delicious.
Thank you.
It's very smooth. It is a dark beer. For those, some people like, some people don't. I used to despise dark beer, but as I have gotten older, I don't know what's going on, but I do enjoy it.
You become a seasoned drinker.
It's very good. And but like when Andy was on the show talking about roasting coffee, I mean, two different things, but once they get that bean profile or the coffee profile that they like, everything is computerized, so they know what to put into the system, so they can now duplicate, you know, roast after roast after roast of what it is they're looking for. You, on the other hand, you're not using that type of technology, right? So that's what you're saying, is everything is almost the same, right? Maybe a little different as far as like the taste profile, like damn near exact.
Yes. Well, and that I do take pride in replicating recipes. But what it comes down to is not taking any of the steps for granted.
Yep.
And that you don't have to do a test. You don't have to check gravity. You don't have to check pH. You know, you have to water. You know, we're on a well. Water comes out, it's pretty consistent. Sometimes it might need an additive, you know, to get it to the proper balance,
right,
you know, before I make a certain beer. So there's multiple steps. And it really kind of starts out with milling grain. If a batch is 40, you know, I do again small batch. If a brew is 40 pounds of grain, you know, it can't be 40 and a half. It can't be 39 and a half.
Right.
It needs to be 40, and then within that you have 6 or 7 grains that you're milling, and it's how big is the you know, how much are you crushing that grain? Not to get too technical, but you know, you can change the mill such that you can crush tighter or looser, and so there are a lot of variables in brewing that, even as automated as you can get, there's still a lot of variability, I guess.
Sure.
But don't take it for granted and test everything. And
right. Well, obviously, you know, you're someone, just, you know, this is the first time we've actually met and talked. Yeah. I mean, in person or over the phone. But the fact that you just threw away, you know, 17 gallons, or
which is a, you know, 7 hours worth of labor.
You know,
but I couldn't put it in the
but
market.
you could have passed it off if you wanted to,
well,
but you didn't, right?
Well, I wouldn't have.
Well, but you take pride in your work.
Yeah, I said, taste this, because it was a beer that she likes, and she said, no, that's not it. And I realized, I figured out what I did wrong, so I can course correct.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, it was, you know, down the drain. But, you know, you hear stories. You know, Sierra Nevada, one of the pioneers in craft beer. They have a story. Their founder dumped, you know, I think it was at the time it was like 30 barrels of beer to prove a point, where I'm doing a half barrel batch.
Right.
You know, and that was way back. You know, he was setting the standard. Okay, then this beer does not meet my standards, so I'm dumping it, and all the employees are standing there with their mouth open watching 30 barrels of beer go down the drain.
Damn.
It's a lot of work, a lot of money.
We're going to go check that place out. My wife and I's anniversary is coming up. We're going to Asheville for our anniversary. So we're going to stay downtown one night and do the whole downtown brewery thing. And then we're going to stay more towards the Biltmore and do that kind of thing the next day. But so for you, what would be the next step? Like, would you want to expand and put your product in more stores, or are you comfortable where you're at now?
Well, yeah, and I have sitting in the area of my brewery a system that, I mean, it's twice as big. It's still, compared to most breweries, a very nano-sized system. It's a 1-barrel system. So I'm brewing half barrel today. This will double my capacity and therefore, double the customers I can sell to. But I find myself, and a lot of this was kind of building the base, and I don't mind doing it regardless of where it goes in the future. But most of the events I'm doing the balance of the year have some nonprofit sort of tie.
Yeah.
Even Hops in Harmony is a charity event where you donate a portion of the beer, and you're selling. They're buying it at cost, and you're donating beer. Same thing with Hops Fest at Langtree. That's run by the Kilted Buffalo folks. It's Ace and TJ's Grandkids Foundation.
Okay.
I'm doing a tennis tournament, Civitan tennis tournament in Mooresville. Taste of the Lake, a YMCA event. So yeah, pretty much all the beer I'm making now I'm giving away to to some charity or the other. But that I get payback for that. I know down the road. And,
of course.
And people, for me, it's exposure. It gets the beer in the marketplace. People that haven't tried it. I've also been fortunate. I've done tap takeovers at most of these places that I've mentioned. There's another one in Albemarle called Doc Hops.
Doc Hops.
A doctor that owns a cool little spot over there. They sell their bacon is their like primary treatment for any entree that you get. So that's my kind of place. But beer and bacon. But yeah, they have a big tap set up there, and they got my beer on tap. So that's a new customer for me. I just picked them up. And that was through a taste test. They came to a tap takeover and tried the beer, and actually they bought this. The Yin Yang is the one that they put on tap.
Really?
Yeah. So it's an individual preference kind of thing. I mean, I'm an IPA guy myself, which I brought an IPA.
Okay.
I'll switch you over here in a minute.
Sure, absolutely. Also, I was going to ask you, one of the next questions was, you kind of specialize in the darker beer, but you do brew a lighter, more hoppier, or an IPA type of brew as well.
Yeah, I've got a range from a blonde. It's called Another Blonde Moment, which is my blonde beer. The IPA I brought is called Wedding Crasher, which it's we've had fun with their name. So our naming convention was sort of along the lines of, and not all of them, but sort of a party theme.
Yeah.
So I have a beer called Pajama Party, and it's a coffee vanilla blonde.
Sounds good.
I've got one called Sleepover, and it's a double IPA. You drink two, you better sleep over.
I was getting ready to say that one's got to be pretty strong.
We've got Peach Festival and Strawberry Festival, but our number 2 beer, and this was kind of leaning back towards the New England style IPA, which is very popular right now, and in tribute to homage to Homer Simpson, it's called "It's a Party in Your Mouth." Some people interpret that the wrong way, and I don't understand why.
Me neither. I don't know how they can.
If you Google Homer Simpson, it's a party in your mouth. He's a bartender, and he takes a shot, and he said, "Ooh, it's a party in your mouth," and everybody's invited. So we came out. We actually trademarked that name. It's a party in your mouth, and I've sold it around. People have to have the right attitude, when they purchase that, and the bartenders get a kick out of it.
Oh, I guarantee it.
They have fun with it.
So trademark, how hard is it to trademark something?
Very difficult.
The look in his eyes, the cold look, like that was the way. You've been more sincere about that answer than anything else.
Well, there's two things. Things that are challenging in this industry, and it's because of the growth.
Yeah.
Number one is coming up with a name in the first place, that hasn't been trademarked, and then going through the trademark process because it's not cheap. And a lot of people refrain from trademarking. There are a number of breweries that just put a name out there, and they're regional.
Yeah.
So they're not as concerned about, trademark infringement and crossing boundaries. But I've got over half of my beers are trademarked, and I do it all myself. I'm also my own attorney, and CFO. So I try to manage the cost of trademarking. But it's a couple hundred, $250 to register.
Well, that's not bad.
A trademark. But I've also made some mistakes because in beer, as in alcohol, which includes wine and spirits.
Yeah.
If for example, and I don't care to tell you, I'll Have Another is trademarked.
Yeah.
Yin Yang is not.
Okay. And
the reason Yin Yang is not is because there's a wrapper that has a vodka called Yin Yang Vodka.
Uh,
And maybe he's listening to this podcast, and he's gonna,
he's probably not.
He's gonna slap me with a.
But if he did, it would be kind of awesome.
Yeah,
but no, he's not.
Trademark infringement, and I have to quit selling that. Which I've got plenty of names.
Oh yeah, you could definitely.
But as an example of the two that are here, it crosses over in the alcohol space. So just because nobody has a Yin Yang beer registered,
okay,
because they can't, because there's a Yin Yang vodka.
Right.
And I learned the hard way, because I would go out and, nobody has Yin Yang beer registered. So I would file the application, and in 6 months, I would get a notice that says, your trademark application has been refused because of trademark confusion.
Too similar to something else.
Yeah.
Right.
But if it's a vodka company.
Right.
It's not even in the beer industry. So if you look at, 7,000 craft breweries times whatever number of beers, say 50 beers.
Yep.
That's what, 350,000 combinations of trademarks that, because if, a beer and a brewery is the same, they treat that the same way as if they were looking at two beers from a trademark. So trademarking is very, very challenging. The label process as well, that you have to go through is very challenging.
What's difficult about the label process?
Well, for every beer that you take to market, you have to, and these are bottle labels, but you also have what's called a keg collar, which goes on kegs that go out for distribution. But the state and the federal government both have to approve any beer that you put out into the market. So what they're looking at is the style of beer, making sure you have all of the appropriate warning labels on the beer, etc. And there's another group that looks at the formulation of your beer. Put some more in that one.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, they look at the formula, and it was a little challenging on this coconut chai porter. When I first applied for the label, they pushed back and said, "Well, we need to understand what's in your chai spice." So I had to give them the 5 ingredients that are in my chai spice. Well, what kind of coconut are you using? Is it sweet? Is it unsweet? Is it flavoring? Is it natural? So they push back, and all this is taking weeks and into months to get a label approved. So and then you're also, and this is an interesting thing about our industry, we test our own ABV, or alcohol by volume.
Yes, I was going to get to that.
In the industry, we have to certify that our beer is, if this says 5.6%, I'm certifying that it's 5.6%. No one's coming behind me and testing that beer.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of variability, I would say, in the marketplace on where a beer is versus where they say it is.
Yeah, it's funny because I joke with Joe at Red Buffalo, and I tell him, I was like, I'm not sure if what you're saying up there is correct, because I think your beers are like in dog ears, because, or what I call them dog beers, because I can drink 2 or 3, and the next morning, well, probably 3 or 4, but the next morning I'm like, what has happened? Did I really only drink like 3 or 4, honey? She was like, I know, me too. And I was like, damn, Red Buffalo and dog beers. You got to multiply by 7.
Yeah. I went to, I won't name the brewery, but I went to a brewery one day. It's in the Charlotte area.
Yep.
And they have a big barrel age program. And we were playing cards there, and this was the tail end of a guy's night out poker run. So we were playing a hand of poker at these various breweries, and we ended up at this one, and the owner takes me into the back because he knew I was into brewing. And we walk up to this barrel, and he grabs a pair of pliers, and he pulls a nail out of it, and he gives me a glass of this, and it was so good. And I said, what's the ABV on this? He just winked and said 14.99, which is as high as it can be.
That's the max, right? That's
the max. So I know it was more than that.
100%.
Because I had 2, and like you said, it was kind of a lights out situation. But yeah, but it is up to, and I think at some point they'll get their arms around that and regulate it. And I know big beverage is pushing harder for, putting contents of your beer on labels and calories and ingredients and protein and
Of course,
carbohydrates
because
and all
like you
that.
said earlier, I mean, they're flat, right?
Yeah.
And they're flat because there's 6,000 breweries that have opened up across the country. So if someone's drinking those beers, they're not drinking the Miller Lights and the Bud Lights and the Coors Lights and the whatevers.
Exactly.
So of course they're going to try to make it as difficult as possible now and put lobby for maybe more regulations or whatnot and just more red tape for you guys to have to jump through.
Yes, and you'll see, and they're quietly buying up craft breweries too. Not all,
Really?
not quietly in every case, but
Yeah. Huh.
oh yeah. Well, the big one in North Carolina was Wicked Weed.
No.
Wicked Weed was purchased by Anheuser-Busch.
Really?
Yep, that
Wow.
that conglomerate. Yes,
So-
but they've kept it. You wouldn't walk in
And
to
know
Wicked
it.
Weed in Asheville and know that they've been purchased. Right.
So, like every guest, I tell them, just assume I know nothing because I pretty much don't know shit about shit. So
it's okay.
that's why you're here. You're
I
going to
can
teach
say
me about it.
anything then,
You can-
right? Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I believe you. Is that something that, if down the road, if an Anheuser-Busch or Miller Coors, if they ever reached out, would that be something you would be flattered with? Of course.
First, they'd have to be able to find the brewery, which would be hard.
Oh, they'll find it.
Shinville Road in Mooresville, right? No, I would. There's no way in hell they would ever
Hey, you never know.
ever seek me out. But
They may find this, yin yang or I'll have Nutter and be like, you know what, this guy's onto something.
yeah, maybe they want to buy the name.
Could
which I would
be.
be happy to sell them the name. And that's the thing about trademarking. Why, and I appreciate that. But there are many, many, many breweries in front of me that would be targets before Little Hootenanny would be. But there is value in trademarks, and you get your name wrapped around, and you own a trademark like Wedding Crasher. I'll let you once you finish that.
Okay.
We'll get into the IPA. Sorry, I poured that other one.
That's
for you,
all right.
But it's Wedding Crasher resonates really well with. I mean, people love it, and you have to see the label to appreciate it too.
Is the label on that
It's
one?
not on this bottle. No,
Well,
it's just a sample bottle.
it's genius because so many people, the original movie is so iconic and the series is so iconic. So that was very smart of you to have the foresight to trademark that.
Well, it was back to Hootenanny being a country party and trying to come up with beers that were relevant. We have one called Late at the Luau, and it's just a play on words.
Yeah.
You get the lei put around your neck at the luau, but it's called Late at the Luau, and I've got it trademarked, and it's a New England style IPA with pineapple. And it came about from I have a stepson, a son that's in the Army, and he was stationed in Kuwait for 9 months, where you can't drink. You can't have any alcohol in Kuwait.
I did not know that.
Well, he was based in Hawaii, stationed in Hawaii. He touched down there long enough to put all of his stuff in storage, and then they swept him away to Kuwait for 9 months. His request when he got back, because he had to leave and he came back to Mooresville and stayed with us for a few weeks, was I want a double IPA, and I want you to put pineapple in it. Okay, I love the challenge. And so we played around, same kind of deal, have a few beers. Come up with the name of a double IPA, Hawaiian sort of theme with pineapple in it. So we came up with late at the luau, and it's an 8% New England double IPA, and it was made kind of in his honor. But that's been like my most popular beer lately.
That's a cool
It's done
story,
really
though.
well. Yeah, there's a story behind every. I think behind every name, for us at least, there's a story behind the name.
Is there another microbrewery or a beer out there that, if you're not drinking your own product, that you really like?
Yes. There's some. I really respect Burial in Asheville. So when you're in
there
Asheville,
Saturday.
oh okay,
Yeah,
all right.
I was there.
Burial has one called Surf Wax.
I didn't see
is-
Surf Wax.
Yep, that's
But
a
I
New
tried
England-
several.
No, it's my go-to beer there.
Surf Wax, okay.
And if I find it on tap anywhere, I'll drink it. If you buy it in a can and you pour it in a glass, it's unfiltered, and so you have a lot of stuff floating around in it, a lot of proteins, yeast stuff floating around
Okay.
in that beer. But it's just, to me, it's it's the perfect balance for a New England style IPA, definitely. So and that's my preferred style of beer is an IPA. I do like let's see, it's called Sip of Sunshine by Lawson.
Never heard of it.
It's become one of those sort of cult beers.
Okay.
It's very difficult. They're in Vermont.
Okay.
Lawson's. They do a great job with that beer. It's hard to get it.
Okay.
When you do get it, it's bootleg. Somebody snuck it out of the state, kind of a thing. That's another really, really good IPA. Bell's Two Hearted is, like the number. Heady Topper and Bell's Two Hearted are the two number 1 and number 2 beers in the country year over year, and they're the kind of the.
I don't know if this year, but maybe 1 or 2 years ago, they were selling that at the Live at 5 here in Statesville.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice. It's a good beer. I mean, there are a lot of beers. I like it because of the history associated with it. The Heady Topper, and then and Bell's is just very consistent anytime you get it.
Okay.
It's my style. It's a West Coast style IPA. I like New England's, but I would favor a West Coast style. And the Wedding Crasher that I brought it's a hybrid. I call it a hybrid. It's West Coast in nature, but it has some characteristics of an East Coast style beer, so it's not as hoppy. It's got a little haze to it.
I'm gonna go grab it a cup.
Yeah,
because we're gonna try it.
Okay, do it.
And one question I will ask before I step away is, if you were not drinking an IPA, what did you used to drink, or what would you drink now? Like a domestic beer.
Oh, wow. Domestic beer. You're gonna make me talk about domestic beer? I would say, I'll drink a Yingling if I've got a domestic beer lineup in front of me. Well, and that's the oldest brewery in the country, right? Yingling. So I would drink a Yingling. I'm going to drink light beer if I'm going to drink domestic beer normally. So I'm going to drink a Bud Light or a Miller Light. I'll drink a Miller over a Bud. That's only if that's the last thing in the cooler, including ice.
I asked that because I am still, as a beer drinker, I drink a light beer. And so you're going to always find Miller Lite in my refrigerator, I just haven't found the craft beer that I can go buy to put in the fridge. But, also you can spend more time, I think, socially drinking the light beers as opposed to drinking some of your heavier craft beers or some of your other craft beers because the ABV, we can't sit there 12 hours and pound, your craft beers. It's going to be a short day for everybody.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I think that really, really low gravity domestic beer, and you'll see a lot of breweries now, and I have one in my lineup. It's called a session IPA.
Session IPA.
So if you're an IPA drinker, but you want, and it means literally, you can drink it for a long period of time. So it's a session. You can have they're typically under 5% ABV. So they're not as low as a Miller Lite or a Bud Light, but
pretty close because those are like 4.1 or 4.2, something like that.
They're down in that range, and so you don't have to give up the the flavor of an IPA, but you can tell the difference in them.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have that strong sort of kick to them. Mine's called Going Stag. So it's another, and the reason it's a play on, it's a single hop.
Okay.
And another thing that you'll see a lot of breweries do, they'll and this is really more for the clientele that comes in and sort of educating the public on hops. If you're not an IPA guy, that may not be your beer there. You may migrate back to the milk stout.
No, it's good. Yeah, it's flavorful.
It's a mid-range IBU beer. It's about a 50. So
now when you say
IBU is the International Bitterness Scale.
Okay.
And it's a 0 to 110.
Okay.
So your super, super hoppy beers are going to be all the way up on the high end
of
the scale. That one's right about 50.
50? Yeah,
and then you'll, believe it or not, even the milk stout and the coconut chai porter are in the 30 to 35, 40 IBU range. So they're, you can get your kind of bitterness in different ways, but typically with an IPA, it just comes across, that really, really strong hoppiness.
So for you
comes through
personally,
it.
where do you like it on the scale for you if you're drinking? Right here?
50 to 70
Okay.
IBU would be my.
That's you. That's where you
Yeah,
are.
there's you've got kind of three main measurements. When you're thinking about a beer, and I'll get back to the session IPA thing in just a second. But you've got SRM, which is a color. There's think about a color wheel, and that's it's the range of light to dark, and so a beer will have an ABV, an IBU, and an SRM. And breweries are now putting that up.
Holy shit.
Some breweries are putting that up really to educate the public on what that beer is before they ever order it. But back on the session IPA that I have called Going Stag, I use right now Mosaic hop in that beer, which is a very popular hop that's typically used in a lot of New England style IPAs today. But next time I make that, I'll use a different hop.
Okay.
Because it's a single hop, so there's a little play on stag and single hop there. And the logo is a guy with a big afro, and he's got on a leisure suit, and he's got his like John Travolta kind of a move going. The stag, the guy popping into the party.
So who does your design, like your marketing, and when you and your wife, y'all do this?
We have an agency that does our called Dune Creative. A guy named Anthony Sanders, who he was also a Lowe's employee, and we've gotten to know him. And he the benefit of having one person do everything is that consistency in the style.
Sure.
Versus you can see where some places would have like breaks in their style, and that's probably because they've used a different agency. I mean, again, when I say agency, he's a one-man shop, so it's kind of like me. He's not a big New York, marketing agency. He lives here in Mooresville also. But yeah, and for me, I have a logo for every beer that I produce, and right now I have 15 beers in my lineup.
15 beers.
Yep. With 5 more.
That's a hell of a hobby, man.
5 more planned. Yeah.
So you're gonna have about 20 beers.
I have 20.
Wow.
20 beers, and they're all L's. There's different styles of beer. I just like L's, so I brew L's, and that's kind of the sweet spot. I think for most breweries would be in the L. I don't do sours. Sours are really big for some, but I don't mess with sours.
So I've tried a sour. I can't do it, man. I don't know.
You need to transition. You need to start drinking like a Goza. A Goza it's a little bit little sour, salty. That's a nice like transitional beer that'll get you kind of worked up to a sour. But I'm not a sour drinker.
No. Why is everything so difficult that we have to enjoy? You start out with the lighter beers, and you work up to your craft beers. Your wines. You start here, you work up. You start with here with your cigar. Everything you got to work towards.
Yeah. Well, if it was all the same, then
that's true. Yeah. I can't just go run 26 miles. I have to just build up to it. Which sucks.
Yeah, well, the idea of running up to 26 miles sucks.
It's terrible.
In general, yeah.
Now, when you're not brewing your beer and your wife's not teaching yoga, what do you guys do for fun?
Well, that's we have a group of friends that we travel with.
Oh.
And it's very kind of sporadic. There's 8 of us in this group, and it sounds like a bunch of swingers or something, but it's not. I promise. We're just all good friends.
I have a funny story for that.
We're all good friends. We get along, and there's 8 of us, and we call our pack the Grade 8.
The Grade 8.
We even have our glasses and etched glasses with Grade 8 and all these other. But it's just a group of really close friends, and we celebrate the big birthdays.
Yeah.
And with 8 in there's always somebody turning 55, 50, 60.
Of course.
So and that can be in a destination trip, or that can be something as close as Charleston or Myrtle Beach.
We something very similar. We have a group of us. There's 9 of us, which is an odd number.
Yeah.
But we are the Pineapple Express.
Okay.
And we travel every off year. We travel somewhere, usually in the Caribbean. And we went to Jamaica this year. But one of our friends, Sarah, had us all these Arctic kind of, what are those, tumblers, with Jamaica 2019. It had our names on it, and it had palm trees, and it had a pineapple on the other side. And we were all swimming in the pool or whatnot, and there was this couple who was over there. And I think the guy was talking to either Greg or Steve or something. And they heard the wife say to him, "Don't talk to them. They're swingers. They've got pineapples on their drinks." Yeah. And so the guys kind of laughed about it because we are the Pineapple Express, but we are not swingers by no means of the definition. But it is funny because very similar story. Every off year, we travel somewhere as a group, and we have a good time. We look forward to doing that, getting away from the kids, which we love all of our children, but you have to have your time. So I have no idea where we're going in 2 years, but Sarah's in charge of that.
Yeah, those are fun to put together. We also have 5 kids.
Five kids. Wow.
We're a blended family. I have 3, and my wife has 2. As you probably figured out through the earlier discussion, we got married. We're both on our second. Well, you wouldn't have known that, but we are both on our second marriages now. Not more than that. And so we now have grandchildren, a grandchild, and hope to have more grandchildren. So I was in Austin last week visiting one of my kids or adult sons, and we're going to Colorado next week to see our grandchild and son. And so that's another thing we do in our time is we travel. We travel by ourselves or we travel with the group.
What would be the one interesting thing or fun fact that no one outside of your close circle knows about you?
That's a good question. Outside of I can juggle and ride a unicycle at the same time. Has anybody ever mentioned that one before?
Nope.
Yeah, I can do that.
Absolutely not. How the hell? Where did you find that talent?
That's it's blending 2 talents together.
It's true.
That I learned independent of each other. No, it's funny. I just 1 year in high school, I was bound and determined. My best friend and I got unicycles, and we spent a whole damn summer trying to figure out how to ride. And we did figure out how to ride. And then we, later at a Lowe's sales meeting, that we had a professional juggler come in, and there were 1,200 people in this meeting, and we all walk in, and we have 3 juggle balls sitting in front of us. And by the end of that session, there were 1,200 people juggling. And so it was, a motivational thing. We're getting everybody on the same team, rah, rah, rah kind of thing. And I just put them together. I'm like, I wonder if I can get on this unicycle and if I can juggle these 3 balls. So we went to this, there was this party we went to when we lived over in Charlotte many years ago. And it was a get to know your neighbor party. Mm-hmm. Everybody comes in, and we're presented with this checklist. And you get certain points for different things that you've accomplished or that have just happened to you. Like if you're a twin, you get a point.
Yeah.
If you've been married 3 times, you get 2 points, 1 for each.
Or negative points.
Yeah, negative points. And one of the things on there was, can you juggle and ride a unicycle? Because the people that put the party on had a unicycle. And,
right.
Yeah. So I was the only one, and it was really like scoring max points too for being able to go drunk out into the cul-de-sac. and I didn't get very far, and I didn't get balls in the air very long, but
you did it though.
But I did it. Yeah.
Good for you, man.
I pulled it off.
So, how can folks find you on social media, or is there anything else that you want the folks out there listening to know about Hootenany Brewery?
Well, so at Hootbrew, Instagram is at Hootbrew.
At Hootbrew.
At
okay.
Hootbrew. Facebook is Hootenany Brewing, and then we have a website, HootenanyBrewingCompany.com.
Okay.
We have some swag that we sell through our website. Although one of the things that I'd hope to be able to talk about was sort of a rebranding that we're going through.
Oh yeah, please.
But we're not there yet, so it's a little premature. We're going to update all of our website with all of our new Hootenany. It's Hootenany. I'm wearing a hat. That's sort of part of that branding, but it's a different color scheme, and but we'll be able to update all of our apparel and stuff here.
So the name won't change.
Correct.
But it's just kind of the branding or logo, or
the logo is the it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But it is to us, but it's not such a big deal.
Well, I
was hoping
noticed on your hat the H and looks like a tap.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we're having some fun with it. Just another play, another, with more of an icon, sort of a look than spelling it out, and people hopefully will resonate, with people in the future when they just see the H with the tap handle.
No, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So smart.
Yeah, and that's thanks for the time. This was awesome, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we'll do is we'll put all your stuff here on the YouTube channel for people to click on, and as well as in the actual podcast description, stuff like that. So I appreciate you coming on, and if anyone has any questions, you can always email or comment, and we'll get you guys set up and try to answer those questions. And also like to say thank you to States Vegas Radio, thank you to Casey Tate at Farm Bureau Insurance, and States Vegas Clothing Company for providing me with all of my my gear this year, Dustin McCurry Law, and Black Flag Holster Company. And we appreciate you guys. Thanks for listening in, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you, and thank you to Hootenany Brewing.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Fun.
Yeah, there's nothing to it, right?
I look at my watch, it's like an hour and a half.
Is it really?
Let's see where time goes. Yeah, 9:30.
Yeah, see, man.
Time flies.
That's what I tell folks.